So welcome for those of you who are out there. I've actually never done a webinar in all my presenting days. I've actually never done a webinar. So this is a new experience for me. It's very strange not to be able to see people. But welcome to collaborating with your child's school team through COVID-19. I am Melissa Fotai-Hoff. I'm a psychologist with the Kelly O'Leary Center. I'm the supervisor of the demonstration classroom, which is a collaborative classroom with Cincinnati Public Schools for students with autism. And I run the community consultation program, which means I go out into the community, into schools and agencies, and help teams set up supports for students with autism. And Celia, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, we froze for a second. I couldn't tell if it was my turn or if people weren't talking. So hi, I'm Celia Schlomer. Welcome from me also. I am the Family Support Coordinator at the UCED, which stands for the University Center of Excellence in Developmental Disabilities. And I am also a parent. I am also, and you'll see a little taste of it, I am a life course ambassador. Charting the life course framework and tools is something that I build into a lot of my work when I support families. So you'll see some pieces of that there too, but it's a privilege to be here and thanks for coming.
And I am Ann Tapia, and I'm the coordinator for the Regional Autism Advisory Council, which is a group here in Southwest Ohio that comes together to support our professionals so that they can provide the best supports and services to our autism community here in Southwest Ohio. So love my job and am more than happy to tell you all uber information about what RAC is and does if you'd like to chat about that another time. I want to just do a little bit of logistical walkthrough before we move into our slides. The session is being recorded, and so we will ask that we have you all muted for this first portion of it as we give you the content. And there are several links that are embedded in the slides that I'll be dropping into the chat, so you'll have access to those right away. And we will also be sharing the live recording of that by the end of this week, maybe early next week, but it should be the end of this week in both English and in Spanish. So you'll have access to the slides and the recorded version. So thank you all for being here with us. We're excited that you're here. We'll go ahead and move forward. So we wanted to start off by sharing that the concept of flexibility needs to be our theme throughout all of this educational adjustment that we're making right now. And just honor, this is hard. It is hard for everyone, and really want to encourage all of us to be operating with grace and with gratitude. So as much as you can, be thankful and forgiving of yourself, of your efforts, and of the professionals who are on your team. We fully appreciate that everybody is figuring things out on the fly, just like you are doing. So we want you to be mindful of that and wanted to start off this presentation just recognizing that we need to take care of ourselves first, and that this is going to need to be paced out. There's no way that we can do everything in the very first week, and even in the next 4 weeks, you know, that we need to just go slow and allow ourselves to take the time to take care of ourselves as we take care of our loved ones, your children in your own household, and be mindful that professionals are in that same boat trying to figure all of this out too. So starting off with that concept of flexibility. We also would like to move into the concept of you still have rights in terms of your IEP and your ETR and all of the plans that were put in place prior to COVID-19. Those are still there for you. We have a link in here, which I'll drop in the chat box in just a moment, that shares that the Ohio Department of Education has put out some considerations for schools to think about how they're supporting students with disabilities during Ohio's ordered school building closures. And what you'll see in that, if you take the time to explore that link, is that they offer a series of questions so that schools, teachers, building administrators can be asking themselves, how do we most effectively provide a free and appropriate public education, and at the same time balance out the safety considerations of the students and of all of the professionals, which is a daunting challenge. And so they offer a number of questions to help each school administrator and teacher think through the approaches that they're taking and some additional ways that they can kind of process the opportunities that they have. From your perspective, we are highly, highly encouraging you to still meet with your IEP team. They are still there for you. And that includes your intervention specialist and your related services folks. It's just going to be a different way of collaborating with them. So we want to encourage you to be creative in those communications and in how you collaborate with one another. We also are encouraging that you think about what is the intended outcome right now, and perhaps your IEP goals, as you think through those, those measures that you're looking at might be a little bit different than what it is when you're in a traditional school building. So we encourage you to ask your team, how are we measuring progress and how are we documenting those efforts? And what is truly what's most important right now in terms of outcomes?
So when we talk about team in this space, and especially in this conversation, we think a lot about the IEP team, right? The school team. And I encourage families to say your school team really goes beyond your IEP team. And in these times, I think, especially when our kids are struggling and we're facing those challenges, we have to think about what that team really is and who's missing. So you're going to have conversation and set up times to collaborate with your IEP team as it stands and the legal definition of what an IEP team is. But you want to think about who else is it? All of our kids have that person that ran in and stuck their head in the classroom during their free bell to say hello to your child, or check in, or always high-fived you in the cafeteria as they were on their way to the teacher's lounge. Or there were other kids that passed by, older kids that would pass by in different spaces, and your child began to look for them. Your school team is beyond just your IEP team, and think about those folks that they might be missing and that connection that they might be missing, and think about ways to allow them to write notes or shoot emails to different people to check in and get feedback back. We all know how much that's making a difference when somebody picks up the phone and calls us and says, how are you doing? And you haven't heard from them and you're like, oh my gosh, have I told you this? And it really makes a difference in this time where we're not connected. In addition to that, expand your idea of team in these times to consider your treatment providers. Who are those folks that know your child well because they saw them regularly in other environments besides school? And make sure that you're reaching out to them and saying, hey, we're doing this and we're doing this, but we're running into this, and what are your ideas? Your DDVP family outreach team. So there's many of us here, and you can always, our phone lines are still open, our emails are still there, and we're all staying in touch with families. So reach out if there's a way we can help. There's always those people in your community. A lot of the Charting the Life course stuff that I do talks about who's your village, who's the folks that you utilize beyond just your IEP team or your official medical team and pieces like that. Who's the person at church that sees you and comes running up and says, how are you? Or the person in the community when your child's not with you and go, where is he and what is he doing? I haven't seen him, what's he up to? Those kind of folks, and utilize them. We all need to feel connected and supported. And the hardest thing is to fight the isolation that is kind of been thrust upon us. And we always say isolation for families with kids with disabilities is a dangerous place. We don't want it. So we've got to figure out how to avoid it in these places. Obviously, your outpatient mental health folks, if you're in a district that has a parent mentor, connect with them. They're still up and running and answering email. People as simple as your pharmacist, keeping in touch if your child gets sick, keeping in touch with staying ahead of how do I make sure their meds can still come. Are we running out of meds? Are meds the meds that are in high demand? And I'm going to run into an issue when we go to fill them. And staying in connection with your pharmacist and other medical staff so that you know what to expect. Be creative with your connections. Think about how to do it. We're all very aware of the high-tech connection. I'm the one that loves Skype and any FaceTime, anything where I can see somebody else's face. I'm kind of when I have one more Skype call, I'm like, okay, do I have to worry about what my hair looks like? I'm kind of done with it. So now I'm to a point where it's like, so those high-tech connections, we jumped in, all the virtual meetings that we're in, then when you want to have a virtual coffee chat, you're like, oh, can I really? So don't necessarily, those are there and you can use them and they're a great resource, but think about the low-tech ways that we always have communicated. Shoot an email, make a phone call, write a letter. My niece Grace is writing letters to everybody that she misses and mailing them, snail mail. And I just can't wait till mine comes. I haven't gotten one yet, but I can't wait till mine comes. So those connections are hugely important and don't overlook them. Texting, just how are you? There's lots of different apps. We've been using one that's new to me called Marco Polo, and you can send little video texts, for lack of what's that, but it's live, and for the younger kids, super cool to get a Marco Polo from a school team member that says, hey, I miss seeing you in the cafeteria. I hope you're doing well. Things like that, I think is super important. I would even add on the low tech side, you know, your kids going out and doing sidewalk chalk pictures on your neighbors saying, I hope you're well, or whatever. But just, I think we need to feel connected in these times where we don't.
So when we think about actually the piece of implementing remote learning at home, one of the big things that I think as a parent myself trying to figure out was, how do we start to organize our time? How do we go from you're at school for 6 to 7 hours a day and, oh wait, now school is in our house for 6 to 7 hours a day. And that was super overwhelming. It's still overwhelming. But I think if we sit down and think about it, we figure out the little pieces of the puzzle that we can start to put together to make it a little better every day. It's still not perfect. It's not going to be, but that's okay. But one piece is to think about how to organize our time. As Anne said from the beginning, flexibility is our theme, but we still want to have structure. So too much flexibility, we know for kids with disability, can be very overwhelming, can actually be anxiety producing. Kids with and without disabilities actually do, although they seem to rebel against it, crave structure. It's comforting to them. It helps create boundaries, especially in a time like now where everything seems turned upside down. I love the cat in your picture, Celia. Where everything seems turned upside down. Structure is still very important. It doesn't mean the whole day has to be structured where every minute is planned out. That's probably very unrealistic for most families. But creating some periods of structure throughout the day will actually be very comforting and is actually more what kids are used to in terms of school, right? They're used to the school and structure boundaries that are created by that routine and that schedule in school. And so we need to try to figure out how to create little pieces of that at home if we're going to do remote learning. So the first thing we always think about in terms, or at least I always think about in terms of creating structure, is thinking about a schedule. And a schedule is not just for work, it's also for play. So thinking about in the morning, you know, simple things like, and we'll talk about some sample schedules in a little bit, but in the morning, having some schedule about how we get up and how we eat breakfast, and maybe then there's a free play time after that, and maybe then that's after, you know, when we jump into then some amount of schoolwork. But having a basic schedule, like I said, we'll talk about some samples in a little bit, that directs both some of the more work type activities that we're going to do in the day, but also some more of the play or leisure type activities, is again very comforting for kids, will help move us all through the day in a way where we feel like we're being productive, and that each day is not just this open abyss, which was kind of, I think, what we all felt like we start to feel like in quarantine mode. Another piece of organizing time is thinking about designating a space for work and play. So just like at school, kids have a designated desk or a designated workspace. It's really important to try and do that at home as well. If you think about it, our brains kind of all base activities on the spaces we're in. So when I'm at work in my office, my brain kind of clicks to that mode of like, okay, now it's time to do work because I'm sitting at my desk in my office space. And kids are the same. They know that in a certain space, whether at the kitchen table, whether at a a little desk in an office or in their bedroom, they know their brain will start to associate, okay, when I'm here, it's time to do this. And that's usually more kind of sit down table think work. So we want to do the same for them in creating that kind of situation at home, just like they would be at school when they sit at their desk at school, as much as we can. The last piece of this is, I think, is kind of also what Anne talked about at the beginning, is don't quit before you get started. It's going to take time to create this new structure and adapt to this, what I like to call new family rhythm. And so we need to give ourselves a little time to figure this piece out of how to organize our time and move everyone through the day in a new way. Okay, so like I talked about before, here are some sample schedules. If families are trying to think about how they might set up their day, if you look at from the left to the right, I'm offering two different types of schedules. Obviously, these aren't the only ways to do it, but I think most families fall in two groups. Either they like a time-based schedule, which means we plan out our activities of the day based on time. So literally kind of sitting down and jotting down at 8 o'clock or about, we're going to do this. At 8:30, we're going to plan for this. At 9 o'clock, we're going to plan for this. So more of a time-based, planning out each piece of the day, knowing some of these might shift a little bit, but kind of jotting our day out based on times. Some families very much like that. That's a lot of structure. That's a lot of commitment in terms of planning that out. Other families prefer more of what I would call a checklist type schedule. So that means jot down all the things that you want to accomplish that day, even maybe some extras, and instead of associating them with a specific time, think of it as setting a goal towards today. Of all these 10 or 15 things on our list, we want to accomplish 3 or we want to accomplish 5. And those may happen at any point during the day, but our goal is to do 3 of these or 5 of these. I've found this style very helpful with my kids in doing schoolwork at home. It's very overwhelming for them to think about their whole day planned out for them when there's feels like so much opportunity for like going outside or friends, like Zoom chatting even with friends. So they like the idea a lot of like, okay, I know I need to get 3 school tasks done today or 5 school tasks today, and I can do those at any time, maybe 1 in the morning, maybe 1 around lunch, maybe 1 in the evening, and I'll still get done what I need to get done. That also offers a lot more flexibility for parents who are also working from home right now, because we know your work you may need to work around your work at home. So it may not lend itself to a time-based schedule. The checklist might be a little bit more flexible. Along with that, the plan or the idea of a plan, I think it's important for families to think about with their support team, so with their school team, intervention specialist related services, etc. Think about, from everything they offer you in terms of a remote learning and instruction, what should be kind of the daily plan? What is it realistic to accomplish each day? So many teachers, I know, not all, but many teachers are offering like a weekly, sending all the work, for example, on Mondays for remote learning. And that takes a little bit of work for families then to think about, okay, that's a lot. How would we break this down into more of a daily plan? So I think it's really important to take that weekly thing, and then, like I said, the weekly instruction, the weekly chunk of work, and break it down into realistic chunks or tasks that you think you can accomplish each day with your child. The other thing about creating a plan for this whole time is to think about short-term versus long-term. So short-term is the plan for you to maybe start doing some actual instruction with your child, but the more long-term plan is to get to the, a higher level of instruction where maybe initially your child's only sitting down with you for a few minutes a day, but the long-term plan is to be able to do longer chunks of instruction, more like maybe they were doing in school. Maybe not, but 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 20 minutes. But initially, maybe the short-term plan is to do, only a few minutes, 2 minutes, and that's okay as a place to start. Maybe the short-term plan is to sit down with your child a couple times a day and do all preferred tasks. but long term it would be to do some preferred things and maybe some not preferred things. So there's lots of ways to think about short and long-term planning, but I think that's a really important conversation to have with your team, to have with your intervention specialist related services. The last piece of the plan is to kind of make sure we're defining the roles of the team members. So everyone still obviously has a role, and although that role will remain somewhat similar, it's going to shift a little bit. A lot of the team now has, like for example, the intervention specialists have shifted. Yes, they're still the primary planner of instruction, but now the role of the parent has shifted a little bit, oftentimes into being a little bit more of the person who implements the instruction, right? So our roles need to be a little bit redefined. Some kids can actually still be instructed by their teacher or the related services through Zoom and those kinds of things, and we'll talk about that. But there is a little bit of tweaking with those roles that we might need to think about in terms of creating these daily plans, instructional plans. Best practices. So even just like when kids are in school, there are best practices, and those best practices still maintain when we're doing remote learning. So it's really important, like Celia was mentioning earlier, to maintain connections. And whether that be through video or audio, it's really important that your kids still feel a connection with their school team and hopefully peers if they can, related services, all those people that they are used to seeing on a daily basis. It's not only going to make their time at home better from social isolation, but when they go back to school, it'll feel, there'll still be that connection that doesn't feel like there was a huge gap in time where they didn't see each other. Another conversation we need to have in terms of best practices is the measurement. So in school, it's pretty clear, oftentimes of how we're going to measure, progress. At home, it becomes a little less clear. And I think the measurement needs to be discussed out loud with your team. Okay, how will we know what we're doing is still meaningful and important for this child? And if we try something and it doesn't feel meaningful and important to either whoever's implementing it, whether it be the teacher doing remote learning or the related services or parent doing instruction, how do we know that it's time to try something else? And so I think that conversation of measuring not only what we're doing, but also when we should maybe shift strategies is really important to say, like, especially for parents to speak up and say, hey, I don't feel like we're getting a lot out of this. Could we try something else? Or I think he's already got this concept. Could we move on to something else? Would be a really important conversation to have. And then again, just like multiple ways to engage with curriculum is important in the school room, it's still important at school. So thinking about lots of various ways that kids can engage with instruction. Again, I think we're all defaulting a little bit to like the high tech, the Zoom and the, all that kind of stuff, electronic, but paper and pen, video, audio, modeling, experiential, all of that is still, just like it's important at school, is important if we're teaching at home. And if you feel like things start to get in a rut where everything's a lot the same, say that to your team. Say, you know what, I think he's getting bored with this. Could we try something else? Is there another way he could do this or she could do this to make this learning more engaging for this person or more meaningful? I think I think the piece of collaboration and speaking up a lot about what your experience with your child at home teaching is really important. Because again, teachers are used to seeing kids for 6 to 7 hours a day, and now they're seeing them for a few minutes oftentimes. And so it's important that we give feedback so we can adjust.
So we want to give you some resources of some pretty cool opportunities that have become available that sometimes they have always been there, but now they're free. And others that are, just a different way of thinking about learning. So I'll drop these links in the chat box. And if you're watching this recorded, you can click on these live links. The first one, just to tell you what's here, this is a daily schedule of online learning opportunities that are all free and geared toward school age. It's color coded and organized by time for each day. And the color coding represents different types of learning. So it covers STEM, physical activities, language arts, a lot of different ways to learn. The Amazing Educational Resources link is a number of different free curriculum that are available right now. PBS and the regular PBS channel has a number of running schedule series that they're offering with complimentary online resources for learning and lessons. And then the last one, again, on that concept of we can't be doing all things screen time, there are some resources included in here in this last one that are low tech or no tech. So we wanted to be able to offer kind of a variety of types of resources. The final link that's on here has all of these resources and then a ton more. So this is just kind of a sample of what's out there. I strongly encourage you to go to what you want on this last link that's on here. There's just a lot of information on there because we developed this with the intention of having supports and resources available for the developmental disability community, but that covers all areas. So go through what's helpful to you and just, you know, don't use what's not, and that's perfectly fine. And that's a growing list that continues to be updated on a regular basis from a number of collaboratives in our area.
I'm on mute, sorry. Anne, are you gonna put that last link in the chat box?
I'm about to do so now.
Okay, great. All right, so we wanted to end with something that you can do to just start brainstorming a little bit about how you're gonna go about this, how you might change what you're doing, how to think about where your resources are. A lot of what I do with family support comes from the Charting the Life course space. And I want to just introduce you quickly to a tool, and you can go back and look at this later to see kind of how it might work for you. And wait until I can see the slides again because they've switched. It's okay. So this is the Integrated Service Star, and the point of the Integrated Star is to think beyond services, think beyond what you're eligible for. And so for a lot of families, their eligibility for that full-on IEP team, intervention specialist, measurable number of minutes per day kind of thing is going away right now, and we're trying to figure that piece out. But in the meantime, how do you not lose that continuity and think of other resources you can use instead? So the Support Services Star is the way that I decided to kind of give you insight to that. So you can go ahead, Anne. Sorry. So the first area that we look at is what are your personal strengths that are going to allow you to build and connect with resources around your child's learning? And you can ask yourself questions. Do I know how to use technology? Do I need to explore some tutorials on how to use the different apps and things that are available? Can I identify a space for school? Am I able to identify at least 30 minutes to an hour per child to support their learning? So things like that. Can I create or discover creative ways to teach or bring material to my child or to reduce their anxiety? So just thinking about what personal assets do you have and can you tap into that are going to make this easier for both your child and your family? Go ahead. And then how can I utilize technology? And does my child use assistive technology? And do I have to learn a little bit more about that and how to use that in this environment? Am I connected to the platforms that the school's using and that I have used along? And do I know Schoolology really well? Do I know Blackboard really well? Or is this the time I've got to get better at learning it because I've got to access it more readily? Can I explore the resources like the links that Anne talked about and look at those more closely about what could help me do this better? Go ahead. It's okay. What relationships do I have in my circle, in my own village that can help me do this? Do I have peer friends, other parents of kids with similar challenges to my child or a similar age or maybe the same classroom? Can I get connected to them and bounce ideas or share struggles or ask for ways to problem solve within that group? Do I have people in my day-to-day that are teachers that might take over 20 minutes via Zoom working on math because that was a struggle for me personally, and I don't know how to tell my child how to do this without making them cry like I did. Identifying friends and family or people at church who can just come in and make a connection to take it away from the school day for a minute. But what relationships do I have? And I encourage bravery in that spot to just ask, can you help me? Can you do a 20-minute math lesson with my kiddo because she is tired of looking at me? Just things like that. Community. Have you considered what you can do outside? We're doing social distance, but what can I do? Can we take a nature walk and just look and observe? Spring is a super great time for that. And what can we see that's happening? The flowers poking up from the ground. Is there a creek nearby? Things like that. Getting out on your bike, creating the sidewalk chalk images that I talked about. Accessing any of the online exercise classes and doing them with your child. This is a great opportunity. We all, especially those that work, struggle with this idea that we miss things. We don't get to do things. Take advantage of 10 minutes a day where you guys do a yoga class together or something online. Just try to make it interesting and different. Go ahead. And then lastly, you look at what you're eligible for. And this is great time when we talked about this presentation. This is a great time to get to know your child's paperwork. We are all in those meetings. We get a copy of the ETR, we get a copy of the IEP, and it goes on a desk, well intended. Go back and visit your paperwork. Look at it. Look at what the profile says that they're doing really well. Look at how they've grown. Look at the progress reports. What were they working on? Can I build something else different in knowing what I know about the IEP or about the 504 that would help me set up a better space for my child to learn? Arrange ongoing conversation. Communication with your team is super important. And having that IEP conversation, not about the IEP document, but with your team members to say, this is what I'm running into, this is what I'm noticing, this is what I'm afraid of. And having and being real and vulnerable and transparent with that team so that those things can be addressed is really where the outcomes that we are looking for at the end of all this are going to really make a difference. So I encourage you to do that too. So it's just one way to use the STAR.
So we'd like to go ahead and open it up for some discussion. We realize we've given you a lot of ideas and concepts for you to wrap your mind around, and we want to take some time with you to process that. And in case you all aren't ready to just dive in with questions, we did want to prompt with a question of what are some practices developed out of this rapid change that you've had to make that you would love to consider as something you keep? What practice would you like to keep?
I'll start. So both of my girls have desks in their room that are typically covered in stuff. They don't generally use them. So one of the first things we did was get their rooms reorganized and cleaned up and their desks cleared off. They are using them somewhat, but at least gives them like an open space to go and do their work. My one daughter said she can't work in her room, so she's actually taken over a table that we moved up into our bedroom because my husband worked at home for a couple days. They shut his office down for a couple days, but he's back at work, so he had to set up an office space. So she's kind of using our room now, and my other daughter is fine using her own desk in her room. But that was one thing I'd like us to try to keep their desk clean, because that's why we got them, was for them to have a space to sit and do work and do those things. So
that's perfect. Thank you for sharing that, Katie. We appreciate it. One thing that I'm hearing from the teacher side is that there are some families who they're providing a bunch of materials to, and it's just not landing with them. And so I know Melissa was referencing this concept of, you know, talk about what works for you. I'm just curious, have you all found that you've reverted back to other resources that you've used in the past, or is what the schools are providing to you helpful? What's been your experience with that?
I don't know how other schools are doing it, but our teachers, my girls are both, I have twin daughters, so they're on the same team, which is nice because we're only dealing with one set of homework that I have to deal with. but they actually did, I thought, a great job. Not only did they give us our weekly assignments, they're all due by Friday, but they broke it down for us by each subject too, on kind of like you guys were saying earlier, like you get this whole chunk of assignments and like, what do we do first? How do we get through this? So they actually broke it down, like this would be a good idea to get done on Monday. This would be good to get done on Tuesday. So they actually have very specific assignments. And then at least for our team, took that next step and kind of broke down the week for us to help us kind of plan, and our kids to plan like what they need to get done so they don't feel overwhelmed. But I don't know how anybody else is kind of doing that. So we just use what they give us, and then they have all the different websites that they have to get on, which has been a learning curve for me to figure out all these websites that they can navigate and I can't.
That's why that was in that star.
Yeah. Yes.
It is tough. It is tough.
Yeah.
I have seen some other teams doing that. My kids were, like I said earlier, getting things in big chunks and they're having to kind of figure out that piece. But I've seen some of their friends, like the teams actually have like almost like an online planner where they're kind of helping kids space out their work, which I thought was amazing. I did hear yesterday my son's Zoom call with his science and social studies teachers. They were reminding the kids, now guys, remember, like if you missed something last week, it's okay. You can go back and do it. Like there's more freedom and flexibility in terms of like deadlines right now because everyone's trying to figure this out. So they said, even if it's from 2 weeks ago, go back and like, we'll still accept it if you have questions about it, which I think is nice to know also as a parent, like, oh, 2 weeks ago he missed something I didn't notice till now, you know, will he get a 0, you know, whatever. And at least my kids' teams have been really awesome about saying, no, we'll take it at any time, just get it to us kind of thing. So it's nice to have a little more
I want to ask, is there anybody here that has not heard from their team at all? I mean, is there one that's feeling like it's the communication piece is not been made available to them? Well, good.
Good.
Great. It's been really amazing to see how schools have just become incredibly flexible in this moment and quickly adapting, and kudos to the districts for figuring this stuff out alongside all of us.
And I think it's important to recognize they are just figuring it out. So if it doesn't feel like it's being figured out well, that IEP space, that team conversation is the best place to start and really kind of talk about expectations. How does this look different? What do I do if they don't respond to me as a teacher? What if just getting through the day is really all we can focus on? And what does that mean for my child's learning long term?
Remind everybody to fill out the feedback survey that we have in the chat box. If you're not aware of the chat box, all you have to do is take your mouse and hover near the bottom of your screen and you'll see a menu pop up. You click on chat. All of the links that the wonderful Ann Tapia shared are on there, and also our link for the survey is there along with our email that you can, if you have any further questions or you need some support or referrals or connections, please email us at ddbbfamilysupport@cchmc.org. It's really simple, ddbp familysupport@cchmc.org, and we will absolutely try and help you. Thank you guys. And the Survey Monkey link, it looks like you're going to have to copy and paste it, and I apologize.
Thank you, Amy. This other link that I'm about to drop in the chat is where you'll be able to find the recorded version. And there are a series of these online sessions that are being held from DDBP. There are 2 that have already happened that are already uploaded on this link. This one should show up by the end of the week. And those are being translated into Spanish as well. So if you know families that would need this content, but in Spanish, that'll be available also. Great, yeah, check out the DDBP or the Kelly O'Leary Center Facebook page as well, where those recordings can be available. If you don't already like the Kelly O'Leary Center Facebook page, there is a wealth of information that is on there, resources, a great space to find out what's happening in terms of trainings and events, which are now online. And so it's an excellent place for you to come. And the lovely Amy is keeping that up to date and doing a wonderful job doing so.
And if you tell your office mates at all.
If anyone has a suggestion about a potential online class, like a subject they would like us to potentially offer, please email that to that DDBP Family Support email. We would be happy. We're open to suggestions. Please feel free.
Any other questions, discussion, things that this prompted for you in terms of how your children are accessing curriculum? You have our contact info. So please do reach out. There's a number of us that respond to that DDBP Family Support, and we would love to be helpful to you as you digest this, or even in the next couple weeks if there's something new that comes around. And once we're out of this temporary COVID-19 space, we're still there. So please feel free to reach out to us for any ways that we might be able to help and support you all. Thank you for joining us today. This has been good to have you with us today, and to help support your educational growth in this current phase of interesting learning.